It was the 19th of August 1979, and a 36-year-old Lynda Jones was picking wildflowers with her two children, 15-year-old Dawn and 5-year-old Andrew. They had just waved goodbye to a friend, accompanying them as far as Simon's Bridge, along the River Mersey in the English suburb of Didsbury, Manchester. It was a 15-minute walk back home, but there was no hurry, the family taking their time to identify and admire the various flora to be found in the long grass of the riverbank. And yet, as peaceful as it was meant to be, the Jones family's evening walk turned out to be anything but, when an object 60 feet wide and the shape of the crescent moon raced across the sky above them, seemingly on a direct collision course with the riverbank. What followed next was a close encounter of the second kind, and, as strange events and regression sessions over the next 18 months seemed to indicate, quite possibly even of the fourth kind, an alien abduction. That evening marking the beginning of a series of terrifying events that saw Lynda Jones, a self-described ordinary, down-to-earth human being, become embroiled in an extraterrestrial-plagued nightmare from which she was unable to wake. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. Unfortunately, researching topics such as alien abduction is not all sunshine and rainbows, and so I like to make sure that after a day of research and writing, I make time for the lighter things in life, like bundling up at home in front of the fire, cozy, reading and spending time with loved ones. And what better way to complement these relaxing activities than a delightful bottle of wine? And so, before we dive too deeply into this case, if you could please allow a brief moment for me to thank the returning and very wonderful sponsor of this video, Bright Cellars. Over the years, it's safe to say I've got into a habit of relying on old favourites when it comes to wine, chiefly rich red oak-aged Rioja. And given how complicated the world of wine can be, it's easy to limit yourself to what you know. This is why I love Bright Cellars, the wine club that believes finding high-quality wines you love shouldn't be difficult. In fact, it should be fun. With their 7-question quiz and algorithm designed to pair your taste preferences with the perfect bottle, Bright Cellars' subscription delivery box not merely matches you with hidden gems from small vineyards across the globe, it delivers them straight to your door also. You can rate your wines to improve your future matches, and with each box guaranteed to delight, even request a replacement from Bright Cellars if there's a bottle you didn't like. Thus, you're very much in safe and knowledgeable hands as you expand your wine horizons. And as an essayist and all-round scholar, my favourite thing about Bright Cellars is their commitment to education, with each box coming with wine education cards to help you learn about your bottles. Thoughtfully designed, they inform you of the various origins, tasting notes, and food pairings for your wines. Given that Valentine's Day is just around the corner, I can think of no better way to spend the evening with the special someone in your life than to indulge in delicious, specially selected wines together, impressing them with your wine expertise at the same time. And so find out for yourself why Bright Cellars has more than 600,000 5-star ratings by getting your first 6-bottle subscription box, usually over $150, for only $55. Simply click my exclusive link in the description to take the quiz and get started with my special offer today. Thank you to Bright Cellars for once again supporting my channel and making my content creation possible, and to you also for listening and doing likewise. Now, on with the video. In various statements and interviews in the years since her experience, Lynda Jones has been able to describe the object that she and her children encountered on the riverbank in the summer of 1979. Initially sighted by her daughter Dawn, the object first appeared to be an aircraft on fire, pinky orange in colour and spinning out of the sky, heading straight towards them. Fearing for their lives, Lynda and her children took cover in the long grass, and yet the anticipated explosion as the craft impacted the earth never came. There was only silence. Slowly raising their heads, the trio then observed the object land vertically in a field over a hill. According to Lynda's testimony, they subsequently ran up the hill, still expecting to see a plane on fire, only to find a very large object shaped like a half-moon hovering 2 feet off the ground. It was 60 feet across, dark grey, and made of a sort of latticework, a girder structure that enabled Lynda and her children to be able to see the field through it. The The family was transfixed, not just by the unidentified object that they were witnessing, but also by the eerie silence that seemed to have enveloped them. It was complete stillness, Lynda recalled many years later. Not only was the strange craft soundless, but the entire riverbank. No birdsong, no traffic from the nearby motorway. It was as though they were within a bubble. At this point, Lynda has described approaching the object. It was, after all, a physical thing, and so unable to believe what she and her children were seeing, she had to get closer for a better look. And yet, as she did, the light from the craft is said to have burnt her face. It was, as she recalled in a later television interview, too bright. A cry of fear from her daughter, and Lynda was drawn back to her children. "We didn't look back," she explained years later. "We just ran down the hill and hurried home." And so here ends their peculiar encounter. Or so they thought. For when Lynda arrived home, she was surprised to find her husband Trevor waiting for them. He had been at work on a 2 to 10 p.m. shift. When he returned home, his family had been missing. And so it was that Lynda realized her and her children's riverside walk had resulted in at least an hour of missing time. She and her children had left the house with their friend at 7:30, had walked for 15 minutes to reach the bridge and then turned back for home, meandering along the riverbank, looking at wildflowers until around 9 when they saw the object. It was past 10 o'clock by the time they made it home. Given that they had run all the way, there was simply no accounting for it. The following day, the Jones family realized even more strangeness. Speaking in a television interview some years later, Trevor recalled how the skin under his wife's eyes was all red, like it had been scorched by the next morning. Burnt and scaly, the damage extended to her eyelids. Not only that, both Lynda and Dawn developed strange marks on their legs over the next few days. The youngest child, Andrew, was unaffected. He did, however, report something else. Horrifyingly vivid nightmares in which men with heads shaped like raindrops were coming for him. Such a disturbing detail provides an insight into the undertone of horror that can be said to haunt the Didsbury case. After all, whilst the story began with wildflowers and summer sunsets, all was very much not as it seemed that August evening. Not only did Lynda and her children witness an unidentified flying object, they seemed to have also encountered something so distinctly terrifying that it made them fear for their very lives. Indeed, researchers Philip Mantle and Nagaitis, through their 2002 edition of Without Consent, reveal how Lynda's 15-year-old daughter had been so petrified by the riverside experience that she had wet herself and needed to change upon returning home. Not only that, in her various testimonies, Lynda has spoken of how her life flashed before her eyes, with her fearing that this was Judgment Day. In her mind, at least, the encounter was biblical, and might have very well ended in the annihilation of her children, and quite possibly even the entire world. Hence why she, scooping 5-year-old Andrew up from the grass, didn't stop running until they were safely home. They were too terrified to look back. They felt as though they were being pursued. In short, something about that experience made them feel as though their lives were in danger. And so, what had Lynda and her children seen that evening? And why did it take them over an hour to run the short distance home? In some way, answers can be said to have arrived in the form of hypnotic regression and the sessions that Lynda was convinced to undergo some 18 months later. Each of the hypnosis sessions was recorded onto videotape, resulting in a total of 10 hours of footage. 10 hours of deeply distressing footage, so distressing in fact that after just watching a small sample, Lynda was left so traumatized that she was unable to watch anymore. "I find it very hard to accept what I actually said under hypnosis," Lynda stated during an appearance on the British audience participation talk show The Time, The Place. After all, she had no conscious memory of any of it. According to her regression sessions, when she and her children ran away from the hovering craft, they saw a person standing by the object. A man in dark clothing, the figure was tall and had dark eyes. After that, Lynda recalled a sensation of floating and then being on a table in a strange room. 6 beings come in, she shared via her witness testimony in Mantle and Nagaitis' book. They were humanoid and dressed in some sort of jumpsuit, like motorbike suits with high necks. As for the beings' faces, they were said to have all looked the same, with slanted eyes, very dark hair, and yellow-olive skin. In another of Lynda's interviews, in which she appeared alongside her husband Trevor, she even went so far as to describe the beings as having big, almond-shaped eyes. Arguably most terrifying, however, was her belief that she knew one of them. She doesn't know how, when, or why, but it seemed as if she had seen him before. Continuing to piece together the events through her hypnotic regression sessions, Lynda claims that she was then subjected to some sort of tabletop medical examination. "I distinctly remember them putting something on my legs," she has explained. "It felt cold, like pieces of ice." If true, such may help to explain why she, and horrifyingly her 15-year-old daughter also, suffered from strange marks on their legs in the days after their sighting. And if all of this was not horrific enough, according to her testimony, Lynda also went on to suffer real-world medical side effects in the weeks and months after her close encounter. She experienced chronic fatigue, and her menstrual cycle was affected, so much so that she was forced to undergo a series of hospital appointments and tests. Ultimately, and to her disbelief, her doctor told her that she had internal scarring consistent with an ectopic pregnancy. Lynda had not been pregnant since the birth of her son Andrew some 5 years prior. Not only that, an ectopic pregnancy can be fatal and would have necessitated medical attention, something which, again, Lynda had not experienced. "I would have known," she asserted in one of her interviews. "I don't know what happened to me, but something did." All of this resulted in her very much questioning lots of other events in her life, as well as why all of this had happened to her and her children. "To be honest, it frightens me," she revealed to Mantle and Nagaitis for their book. After all, she had no recollection of what happened that August evening, and perhaps was never meant to have had any for her own mental well-being. Looking at the Didsbury abduction as a whole, it is very easy to draw lines between this case and others which report similar happenings. Missing time, for example, can be said to be synonymous with alien abduction cases. That such missing time is recovered via hypnotic regression is, again, consistent with other reports. In this way, it can be said to be interesting to consider Lynda's personal background prior to her experience. After all, according to one of her interviews, she had no knowledge or interest in UFOs or anything science fiction before her experience. Indeed, when analysing some of the terminology she uses to describe her encounter, it is interesting to note how her mind turned first to religious imagery, such as the Day of Judgment, before that typically associated with UFOs and alien craft. Such is not only compelling in terms of the authenticity of Lynda's testimony, but also once again aligns her with other alleged alien abductees, in particular John and Elaine Avis, who experienced 3 hours of missing time after encountering a UFO in 1974 in Averley, Essex. In this instance, the 2 researchers involved in the case, Andrew Collins and Barry King, are reported to have subjected John and Elaine to a series of questions about UFOs and extraterrestrials so as to assess how much they knew about the subject matter. They, so Collins and King concluded, had very limited and non-specific knowledge. Not only that, the concept of missing time being connected to their sighting of the UFO was entirely novel to them. All of this suggests that, far from being reported solely by deranged individuals desperate to believe in the otherworldly, alien abductions are instead often associated with perfectly ordinary or, as Lynda expressed it, down-to-earth people with no prior inclination towards extraterrestrial subject matter. With this firmly in mind, it can then be said to be overwhelming to consider the entire network of similarities in Lynda's testimony to that of other cases. Missing time, rashes and burns on her skin after exposure to the craft, the horrific medical aftermath, even potentially the location of her encounter. For indeed, in a recent piece written for Fortean Times magazine, veteran UFO researcher and author Jenny Randles considered the recurring connection between rivers, missing time and alien abduction. drawing attention not merely to the role of the River Mersey in Lynda Jones's 1979 experience, but to other cases also, such as the infamous Pascagoula abduction, which saw two men experience strange craft and creatures whilst fishing off a pier on the west bank of the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. Even from my own experience of interviewing UAP observers and potential abductees, including Welsh native Helena Worth, connections between UFOs and rivers, in Helena's case the River Aron, have been proposed. Certainly, as Randles concludes in her article, there are multiple cases adjacent to major rivers. Indeed, in one sensational television appearance, Lynda was actually hypnotically regressed live in the studio, with the hypnotist afterwards reporting that, under hypnosis and in a state of extreme terror, she had recalled seeing a ball coming out of the river very, very slowly on the day that she saw the UFO, firmly connecting whatever happened to her that day in Didsbury to the River Mersey. Here then, it is arguably fascinating, and indeed somewhat unnerving, to consider yet further connections to water, ones which stretch us out into the wider world of the paranormal. After all, in addition to being related to missing time and alien abduction, such as in Lynda Jones's experience, water is also said to play a role in poltergeist-accredited phenomena. Thinking of the infamous Black Monk of 30 East Drive and the poltergeist activity reported there by the Pritchard family in the late 1960s, there are claims that there is an old well and thus a direct connection to an underground watercourse underneath the property. Considering this, many believe that water has the ability to amplify spiritual energy, as it may be easier for ghosts, spirits, and other ethereal or interdimensional beings to travel through liquids, as opposed to solid objects or gases like air. In this way, one might consider how electricity interacts with water. It is an excellent conductor. Might it therefore be an excellent conductor for strangeness also, whether that be of a ghostly or extraterrestrial sort? All very thought-provoking, if a little too wild for those with conservative tastes. After all, such suggests that there might not be much difference between aliens and ghosts, ETs and spirit entities, and that when we speak of the other side, that other side might be rather a lot larger and rather a lot more populated than we might first think. Lynda Jones was very adamant that the still and soundless craft that she saw that day in Didsbury was a physical object. But given how efficiently it seems her memories have been scrubbed and concealed, even from her own mind, we simply cannot say what she saw, or to what realm or dimension it may have belonged. Thank you so much for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more of the paranormal. And if you would like more and want to support my work even further, I have an entire second channel of content, including paranormal explorations and personal stories for you to enjoy, linked both in the description and on screen now. Thank you again for watching. Until next time.